Hello. I think you're on mute. There you go.
I log in mute intentionally.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Sick. How's your day?
Pretty good. It's snowing over here in New Jersey, so
Oh, you in New Jersey?
yeah. Lots of snow, lots of cold.
New Jersey, all the action right now.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I guess we're just waiting for Angela.
I'm Angela.
Oh my gosh. I don't know why I thought you guys were going to come on different videos. That's hilarious.
We were, but we figured it'd be easier to just be together.
Yeah. So, hi.
Yeah, so I'm Angela White from Success Centers.
Nice to meet you guys. I'm Kalyn. I'm an editorial intern at Honeysuckle. I just started with them about last month, and I'm a senior at George Washington University, and I'm graduating this year. So, yay! Thank you so much for coming. And I have introductions for you guys for whoever's going to be watching this later. So, Angela White is an equity for industry program manager at Success Centers. Her focus is developing sustainable career and entrepreneurial paths previously less accessible to communities impacted by inequality and the war on drugs. She offers community members career assessments and coaching, job placement, access to on-the-job training, and job training for employment in the cannabis industry. She also assists verified equity applicants in obtaining the critical business experiences, educational resources, tool sets required to develop sustainable business models and achieve entrepreneurial success. In less than 3 years at Success Centers, Angela has developed an incredible array of workshops, resources, and growth opportunities for community members and Success Centers partners seeking to establish their equitable participation in the rapidly expanding cannabis industry. She's also responsible for Success Centers' partnership with Oaksterdam University and Hood Incubator, providing opportunities for community members to engage in these preeminent cannabis business tracks through scholarship. And Marie Montmarquet is the co-founder of MD Numbers Incorporated, a family of vertically integrated cannabis brands, including MD Farms, Marie's Deliverables, and Legacy Coterie, that provide a range of goods and services to California supply chain, retail consumers, and equity community. Marie is a legacy cannabis operator who's been passionate about the plant for over 13 years. Over the last decade, she's created several successful cannabis businesses along with her brother, Alan Hackett, with whom she co-founded MD Numbers Incorporated and its subsidiaries. Marie and Alan are also minority owners of Cannabis Express, having helped build one of the Bay Area's biggest delivery providers, in addition to developing and scaling successful cannabis businesses. Marie is also focused on being an advocate for social justice and equity in the industry, and she's an advisor to the Cannabis Equity Program for Success Centers and offers monthly tours to MD Farms for equity applicants. So thank you guys again so much for joining us at Honeysuckle Magazine. And let's get started with these awesome discussion questions. We have a ton, so hopefully we get through all of them in the hour. So first, I'd like to ask you, the cannabis industry, as like other industries in the US, is fairly unbalanced between white owners and owners of color. And this is due to numerous factors, including the disproportionate number of Black people and people of color in jail because of cannabis, and also their white-owned corporations are using the resources and tools of systematic racism to create barriers of entry to the cannabis industry. So how do you guys think these factors have impacted your personal journeys as Black women entrepreneurs in the industry?
I was going to go first.
I think that, systematically, we are still seeing the same injustices in cannabis that we see abroad. But in cannabis, I like to say it's a microcosm of what we see economically throughout all industries in America. You don't see a lot of minority representation. You see less woman minority representation. You see very little funding going to minority businesses. And then we look at a situation where we're commoditizing something, but at the same time and still arresting Black and brown people throughout America, right? So when we look at the history of redlining and how that kind of rolls into cannabis, it definitely creates barriers where obviously we're not the most funded groups. That's why we were affected by the war on drugs. That's why we have systematic racism. That's why we can't get funding or real estate or proper appraisals, or, you know, the list goes on. We live in a very clear society of racism, right? So in cannabis, instead of pausing and saying we're going to elevate minorities first before we allow the 1% to get richer from this same thing we're putting people in jail for right now, right? So we didn't do that. We gave no priority to making sure that there was a fair playing field to start with. And we didn't fund programs that are associated with equity in ways that were quick by any means. So there's so many different facets to the problem, right? But we're playing catch up. We're still waiting for funding. We've been told that we have, I think on our call with Success Centers last night, it's kind of like we have a golden ticket when we have priority equity programs, but then when you start looking into it, they tell you you need a silver dollar. And you're like, wait a minute, they gave me the golden ticket, right? But
too, right?
It doesn't come with the real estate. It doesn't come with the funding. It doesn't come with different contract analysis that keep you safe and make sure that you have good partners. So there's a lot of hoops that we see traditionally in America every day that are playing out in cannabis, but they're playing out rapidly.
I would agree with everything Marie just said. So as a just an entrepreneur, I don't know if I want to call myself that as much as I want to call myself a cheerleader and an encourager and a mentor for the many members of this community that are trying. And when I can see someone trying and you see, it's almost like a carrot dangling situation, but I'm trying to change that. You know, the carrot is there. Every time you get a little closer, they pull it farther away. Well, I'm trying to help them get to that carrot, and actually grab it and have a bite of it. So that's, how I'm working to help this community.
Awesome, thank you. My next question is about representation with women in the industry. So they have a higher representation as owners in the cannabis industry than any other industry. In 2018, there was about 33% of owners as opposed to any other industry that had about 27% of women owners. So what glass ceilings did you guys, or do you guys plan to break in your work, and how can more opportunities be open for women entrepreneurs?
Well, when I think about me, I'm working not in cannabis, but I do see, the women that are forging forward. I'm there to encourage and offer assistance wherever I can, bringing them resources, because people think because you get a business open that it's easy to maintain that status. And, there's a struggle for us already just trying to pay our rent, so I just want, people, women to still be encouraged, not give up, but we're coming for this.
Definitely. I think it's interesting to see so many women in cannabis compared to other industries, which is actually more of like an empathetic piece of business, right? Where there's studies have shown over and over again that different pieces of business require different things, and it's not always very like sales testosterone driven. Sometimes it's very empathetic. Sometimes it requires more of that woman touch. Mm-hmm. I have a book that I read where Brahmin Bank was this bank, and they took villages that were impoverished and started giving out really good loans, but they only gave the loans to women, and they loan billions and billions of dollars. They're one of the largest banks overseas for that now, but 97% of their loans get paid back to the women that they that they fund. So it's very interesting just to look at the data and you say, hey, maybe, you know, women should be running the country, or maybe women should run a lot of these businesses. I mean, I literally watch National Geographic when I have time, and I watch, you know, the Amazon and the palm oil fields, and you just look at it and you can tell men rule this world. You know, you can look at our environment, you can look at the water we drink, you can look at the air we breathe, you can look at the fires that we have, you can look at everything going on all over, and you can tell that there's too much for-profit driven, ego-driven business that controls the world, right? And labor is looked at as a commodity too much, whereas women tend to look at it more as a value add, and where can you get more out of people and bring up the best in people. And not to say, you know, like my business partner is a man, and he is amazing, and he does everything that I need and compliments me in every way. But when you look at it, it's just beautiful to see that this is actually more probably what should be more normal in America, women representing a lot more companies and a lot of larger roles. So yeah, I wouldn't have thought, you know, that would be the representation. So I'm surprised and happy to see so many just boss women stepping up and taking over cannabis.
Yeah, I mean, we've also you know, we prior to you know, our status in this country, you know, running homes, you know, and that kind of a thing. And I'm an older school person, and I know how to make something out of nothing. I had to do it most of my life, you know, with raising my kids and trying to figure out a way. And so when you see people that are struggling along and trying to, you know, build something, you know what that's all about. Whereas I think men are kind of close to that. I don't want to make that statement and just, you know, leave it out that, but we're just more nurturing as people.
And kind of going off a little bit of Marie's point, you touched on a little bit of the economic factors. So how do you think wage equity plays a role in this?
Huge.
Well, I mean, I'm a lesbian, and I joke all the time that the 83 cents that I have and the 83 cents that my girlfriend has, we're going to be fortunate if we can make it to the top around here, right? Like, it's a joke, but it's not a joke. I mean, the fact of the matter is, it shouldn't be everyone has to have some crazy entrepreneurial spirit to have a living wage in America. Like, that is asinine. That's ridiculous. My dad was a professor, and he made a professor's wage his whole life. No person that I have different thoughts, and I'm all about, you know, making sure that people can empower themselves. But at the end of the day, if you're doing the same job and you're doing it just as well, if not better than your counterpart, and your counterpart is a man, then obviously that's completely sexist. It's not right. It's not good for the business, and it's not good for the worker. So it's good for no one. And if I, as an employee, find out that my coworker is making, you know, that other 17 cents a dollar, and I'm not making it, but I know I show up every day early and he's late, and I've got, you know, all my processes and procedures are always top notch, and his may or may not be that way. It doesn't matter. I'm going to work less hard, or I'm going to feel a certain way and be less productive for the American economy, right? And that's just the fact of the matter. But I am huge. Like, this is one of the biggest things for me when I think about teachers, or when I think about just all the people that are not, everybody didn't want to run a business. Everybody shouldn't have to run a business. Right? Like, I grew up in a home where my mom was very, very adamant about me being an entrepreneur. Everybody should not have to come from that home. If I decided to be a teacher right now in Nashville, Tennessee, where I'm from, I should make a wage that's equal to the man across the hall from me. I mean, we're in 2021, you would think that, of course, we're not dealing with the same issues we dealt with in 1901, but we are on all sides of the board, right? Yeah. So we can't sit here and be very oblivious to any of the obvious issues that are glaring in America. And I'm ignorant to a lot of things, but when Ruth Ginsburg passed, and I read that she was the reason why women could have their own mortgage, and I just looked like, why do you think the world is the way it is? If women could not even own land, if the only people that control this world are white landowners for a very long time, and then finally we let some white women in there, and then we just trickle in who's got the money. Like, that's not the way that any of these things are supposed to be. But
that's why there's this big, huge wealth gap, you know, the way that things were laid out. And for Black people, we're like at the end of, we still haven't gotten, you know, fair treatment, even now with real estate and all these other things that are still happening. I mean, it's not, nothing has really changed. I mean, it's supposed to be changed, but the same people are doing the same terrible things.
And it doesn't matter where you are,
Yeah.
right? Like you're in New Jersey, you see the same things we deal with. I'm in San Francisco, we're in the Bay Area.
Mhm.
I've lived in LA, I've lived in Nashville, I was born and raised, I've lived in Knoxville. My mom's from Buffalo, New York. It doesn't matter. You know, these are the same issues you see no matter where they are. And
Mhm.
there's a point at which it's so oblivious, or it's so obvious now rather, that we would hope and pray that these won't just be conversations, that there will actually be changes in policy and changes in redlining and changes in economic development that go to areas that have clearly been harassed by racist policies and
Mhm.
impoverished by racist policies. It's not like we have to dig too deep.
It's there and everyone sees it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And kind of going back on just the track of equity and kind of narrowing it down a bit, why is social equity so instrumental to the future of the cannabis industry specifically? And in addition to that, what are some of the biggest challenges facing Black-owned cannabis brands and businesses today?
Wow, real estate for one here in San Francisco. You know, as soon as a property owner hears that you're going to start a cannabis business, the square footage amount triples. So yeah, it's a lot of unfairness, and those are things that even you can't really go out and just get a loan. There's a lot of things, a lot of factors that have hurt us in the traditional markets. Not, you know, it's not just cannabis. Um, nothing has changed. It's still the same thing. It's very hard. And the reason why they should have equity programs and they need funding for these programs is because if you're going to give someone a golden ticket or a way into this industry, you got to make sure that these things are financed. We already know we're hurt nationally. A Black person's family nationally is, what is it, $1,200 liquid? That's our wealth status. What? In a country that, you know, we know what we've done here, and we deserve to be into this. And when you look at the stats of the arrest rates and things of that nature, you know, make sure that you're looking at that data when you're deciding how your equity programs are structured. You know, I think right now they have, it's so vague in many places that people that are qualifying for these social justice programs or equity programs are people that really shouldn't really be in it. If you go by the data, you know, of who was hardest hit, whose families were devastated, you know, you're looking at someone that kind of looks like me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like that question is so deep, but there's the needs of what the cannabis businesses that, you know, Black and brown businesses need, of course. And then there's the reasons why it should be mandatory for every city to have a social equity component, a social, like a prioritized social equity piece before they authorize any, you know, conglomerate
to come in and do that.
You know, I was telling Miss Ange about the Wrigley brother today, like the guy who makes the chewing gum. He is now one of the largest cannabis owners and said his cannabis empire will be larger than his gum empire. How does this happen so fast?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when Black and brown people are literally going to jail every day. Meanwhile, we have the 1% allowed to be privileged to participate as usual and not give any others the ability to, because they create barriers of entry that are so high that if you don't have millions of dollars right now, it's very hard for you to have a fully functional cannabis business. Like you can start small, but just to get your building, just to get your permit, to pay rent for a year and a half while your business is not operational, then to have operating costs, then to go through all the nuances of your purchasing, your taxes. All of this is very expensive, right? Yeah. Like but your marketing budget alone, like there's all of these things are so expensive and there's nowhere to go for funding. And if you look at startup funding, that's what we're doing, right? All cannabis is a startup. People don't really think about that in that notion. Like this is all startup funding. This is not VC money that necessarily is coming down right now. This is angel, like there's some VC money, there's some angel investors, but not for me. You know, not for people that look like me. Like there's no bank money for people that look like me. Like that's just a fact. Like until you have an established business with years of taxes and your profitability in line, your profit and loss sheets, balance statement, cash flows completely done, then you can go and look for this traditional investment, right? Then people say, now because my brother and I are successful, they're willing to invest in us. But there was a time when like my background is our farm, and when our farm did not look like this, nobody wanted to invest in us. Nobody believed in us, but we believed in us. So, I mean, it's one of those things where entrepreneurship is so hard in America, as in a nutshell. Then you have Black and brown entrepreneurship being way harder. Then you have a federally illegal drug where you cannot get traditional support in any way. And then you have the fact that it's modern day slavery. And you put all that with all the economic struggles that we currently face without any current funding, it's nothing that makes sense, right? You have to make it make sense. If you want Amazon to come to town, you give Amazon tax breaks. You do all these things. You build roads. You love every piece of the project, and you smoosh them in. For cannabis, especially for minorities, we're still on the outskirts of all of these different pieces that you really want to be on the inskirts. You're like, I thought they said this was going to be reparations, or this was going to be help for people. Like, no,
it's
nowhere near. It's the
It's nowhere near reparations. That's
I mean, if they can, they will give all of these businesses to people that look just like the Wrigley guys before they give them to people that look like my brother and I. And another really like this brought me to this point was like Black people in America today, we have no industry. If you see a rich Black person, he has to play basketball, he has to be in entertainment, or he has to be scamming. That is 3 things, like, right? I'm just being honest. Or maybe he's dealing drugs, right? Which is in this category. It's sad that people would see my brother and see like, oh man, this is an affluent Black man. He must be doing something wrong.
right.
Like, but you could see an affluent person in all other aspects, right? And you're like, oh, they have an industry. Oh man, their family's selling avocados, or maybe they have a tequila company, or of course, white people own everything, or maybe Indians or the Koreans, or we've allowed all these people to come into America and build their own America, build their own dream, which is great, amazing. But when you look at a Black man with money in America today, he has no industry that he can stand on. And cannabis should be the industry, if any. If you're not going to allow us to make money in the country that we built, please allow us to stop going to jail and be privileged enough to make money on what we've created and that our culture has thrived on for so long and put themselves at risk for criminalization for so long.
Ooh, drop the mic on that. For real though, right? Absolutely, Marie.
Absolutely. So kind of going off of the discussion on how there's so many disparities in this industry, how are success centers and MD numbers trying to level the playing field?
We're working personally. You know, we have to get, you have to understand the dynamics of the folks that you're working with and what they're going through, and have empathy, and then try to go out and find what they need. And at this point, we need a little bit of everything. We have you know, a great technical assistant team with Marie and Jessica Strange, who are working directly with the equity applicants, walking them through the permitting process. And then there's recently been some grant money that's been issued, showing them how to put together their financials to get some of this money reimbursed. It's a reimbursement plan. So we're providing whatever service. I see something else on here, so I don't know what that is.
Sorry, there's a little bit of feedback.
Right.
There's an iPhone that just popped up.
There's an iPhone.
Oh, that's my editor. Okay, she's muted. All right, sorry. Please keep going.
Okay. Yeah, I lost my train of thought, but we're doing whatever I say, whatever they need, and I listen to what their needs are, and I go out and try to find it. And I've been pretty good at that, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I learned from Miss Ange. Like, I come from a standpoint of like, I'm from the South, and I moved out here to sell weed legally. I knew what I wanted to do when I moved out here in 2010. Okay, so I came from a gift of foresight, at least, saying I want to get involved in this legal industry and I want to be a business owner. I went through all the challenges though of seeing like, man, they'll allow me to pay taxes, but they won't give me an office in a town that's, you know, looks at me and thinks, you're too young to make this much money and we're not going to give you an office. Like, this looks weird, you know, or different struggles with my HOA calling the cops on me for thinking we were selling who knows what, but all we had was a legal delivery business. And just going through all the legalization struggles from Prop 215 when we were highly self-regulated, better than we are now, which is overly regulated in a way that's actually not even as quality control oriented or good for the patient. And so I've seen all these struggles and I've been through all these struggles that are just a piece of me, but as well as like being able to say, okay, meeting Miss Ange and understanding the needs of the community, being in the community. I'm not technically like equity in San Francisco. My brother and I have both been to jail for weed, but we've just been on the other side of things, right? So being able to see Miss Ange and be like, oh man, like, wow, there's help for people that look like me. And there's somebody that's actually genuinely helping people that look like me, not because, you know, they do it for some glamour or any other reason, but because they genuinely want to see people do better. And then it allows you to dig a lot deeper, right? And to see like, what are the real issues here? What are the real needs here? What types of people can we help? And what tools can we bring together to actually implement change?
Yes.
Right. So that's the things that we work on. And I think like Miss Ange has single-handedly gone through San Francisco and made sure people are hiring Black and brown people, making sure the footprint that brands are talking or actually that they're walking, right? Making sure that people are able to keep their jobs and have upward mobility in a lot of these big companies that claim that that's what they were doing when they promised that to city council.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, there's not a lot of oversight or accountability on a lot of these big brands. And for a lot of the things that we're doing, Miss Ange is the accountability. Like she's the person that can hold their feet to the fire because she's really that person that implemented these processes and took in these promises and are holding them accountable, right? So it's just so many pieces of the pie of like the things we need money. You know,
majorly
we need money. Like it's insane to think that all of these people can come through these programs and have reimbursements to open up a business when you're supposed to be coming from an impoverished place.
Exactly.
Or not taking predatory deals. Like these are like we want to make sure that we can give them all the tools possible. So it's just a beautiful relationship that like Success Centers has, Ms. Ange has created with San Francisco, because everybody knows that if they have an interest in getting involved with cannabis deeply and they really want to get involved with the equity program, they're willing to do the work, they can come into Ms. Ange. She's going to give you all the tools. And it's going to be up to you to sharpen the tools and to put certain ones in your backpack and pick up certain ones and leave them. But it's definitely about being able to at least give you access to the information and tools and specialists, and that can actually bring about tangible change for whatever you're envisioning, and understanding at least the economics and the bookkeeping and the finances, which are a lot of the things that keep Black and brown people out, right? Like taxes, blah, 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 blah. Like understanding a K1 partnership, oh my gosh, all things like, do you want an LLC or do you want a corporation? Where do you start?
Yeah.
You know, where do you start? Ms. Ange can bring in the experts that are actually going to give you the information that are really, really special. So I'm like, been working with Ms. Ange with my challenges. She sees my challenges, and then we can bring in experts to solve my challenges and everybody else's challenges. So it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, it doesn't stop. Like I said, once you get your business up and running, you're still going to run into issues being a Black or brown person in this industry. And so I get calls of people who are actually up and running that are still having issues. You know, and when you mentioned about the taxes, I want to go back to say, you know, we're open to folks coming in, but I do an interview with you to see where you are spiritually as far as working with this community, because, you know, you have to have the right attitude when you're coming in. You're not going to talk down to my folks. You know, you're going to give them good quality information. And there's a lot of information that we didn't get in our homes because we weren't exposed to wealth. And so I'm trying to ensure that, you know, the folks that are coming in to work with my folks, you know, treat them, you know, like the kings and queens that they are. So yeah, it's just been a wonderful, wonderful journey. I'm not through yet. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm going to keep working. And those that want to meet with me to discuss what talents they have that they want to bring to the table to work with our equity applicants here in San Francisco, I welcome you. Call me.
Absolutely. So my next question is actually for you, Angela.
Okay.
You are a graduate of Amsterdam University, the country's first university with a focus program on cannabis business. So how did your education as well as your pioneering work with California's regulative legislation influence your approach to the equity programs at Success Centers?
So when I first came to success centers, there was nothing there, and I used to think about, I thought about when I was young and wanted to have a cannabis business. I was interested in growing, and I wanted to go to Amsterdam, but like many families that come up, we didn't have the money to go there. So when I got this position, that was one of the first things that I did. I went to Amsterdam to a event, and I met the chancellor over there, Del Scott Jones, and I told her what it was that I was trying to do. And this is what I'm saying, like, there's some really good people, that are not, that don't look like me, that really know what's happening in this country. And she immediately said, you're the person I've been looking for. And so with that, we've been able to bring folks to Amsterdam that can get the education in the business of cannabis and their horticulture programming. It's been a wonderful partnership. And so we need that. Marie, I said Marie to Amsterdam. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
you were the person I've been looking for.
Right. So, I mean, these are the kind of resources that we've been able to provide to our community. And I want to continue doing that, and it's just been like I said, a wonderful journey.
That sounds wonderful. And my next question is for Marie. So prior to cannabis, you ran a commission sales company that oversaw direct TV connections for big clients like Walmart, Costco, and Best Buy. So how did your experience in the corporate world prepare you for the cannabis industry?
It was good. It was really necessary, right? So I grew up working for my mom. So I was like, how do you relate working for your mom to big business? Of course, it's very relatable, but you really have to get a couple corporate structures under your belt to really understand how to build business. This was a sales and commission driven company. So I sold books door to door in college, which was very interesting in Texas. And I've always been just a very driven salesperson, to just no's mean yeses type of an individual. And I have to get through everything that I need to get through to be successful, right? So I learned just a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the type of person I wanted to be, how I like to treat people. I trained so many people. I did 10 interviews every day trying to hire for my team. And we expanded, and I hired some really good people. They're still running the Central Valley even today. But yeah, I went there. And then after that, I had a job managing a plumbing company. And that was super interesting because I learned delivery and counter sales when I was in that aspect of work, as well as like how POS systems, point of sale systems work on a large scale, where like we're ordering water heaters by the millions, then we have a really robust system that can take on that technology and do the pre-calculations for what you need to order and electronically send it. And then coming into cannabis, you see how antiquated our systems are because they're just not very open to working with one another. Everybody hasn't made any money. And that's the other thing to remember in cannabis, is most people haven't made any money. Mm-hmm. So it's still a very crab in a barrel situation, but you're working with these POS systems now that you don't understand why they don't work in certain ways that other industries do. And so now, because I have some of that corporate exposure and have built just entrepreneurial sales companies and then managing in that wholesale plumbing realm, it definitely gave me some tools. I mean, I feel like I've been like in an MBA crash course the last 5 years, especially since 2018, since legalization, and just like I was going to go to law school. I kind of wish I had gone to law school with all the contracts and everything that I had to learn. Because cannabis, you learn a little bit about everything. Like you're your own everything. I drew my first logo. We did all my marketing. I analyzed everything on my sales side. I was my POS system for a while. I did all my inventory. So every little piece, right? I'm the one buying all the product. I'm delivering product. I mean, I'm doing everything, right? So I put together my website, and I'm like joking. Every time I kind of do something that's out of my wheelhouse, I'm like, man, all the things you have to do just to sell weed. Who would have thought, Who would have thought? And I've learned so much about Squarespace and Wix and how to host things. And you just dive so deep into your G Suite, and like, you're just learning, right? So it's nonstop. But yeah, all of these things were helpful for me. But I would say like my brother, for instance, he's very informal. And he worked for Wells Fargo for a little bit, and he worked for another company, but he didn't graduate college, and it's that to us is like a benefit truly, because he looks at things from a different perspective, and he is a hustler and he is a moneymaker, right? So me, I'm like very business oriented, and I'm like, hey, we should look at this and this factor. And that's another reason I think why women do so well in business, because we're usually the one pulling the men out of the illegal realm or gray realms of cannabis and trying to, hey, come over here, we can legally do this, right? But yeah, it's just been a very, very interesting process throughout it all, figuring it out.
And so like just being around people like Marie is just so dope, because I know when she's telling me stuff, and I do a lot of listening. I listen to the equity applicants. I listen to these professionals that what I call they're my experts. And then I will put together workshops, you know, like she talked about standard operating procedures. We've done workshops on that, and we just try to provide everything, understanding these contracts, in the non-disclosure agreements, you know, when to say yes and when to tell people to kick rocks, you know, just just trying to get people prepared, because, you know, it's like with what happened with the record industry. You know, a lot of our musicians, they got cheated out of something that they should have been theirs, you know what I mean? And so I don't want that happening to us. I want people to know how to how to understand these things. So I'm trying to prepare them for everything that they may encounter going forward.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Were you going to say something else?
I was just going to say Master P.
Master P.
Own everything.
Own everything.
That's right.
So kind of switching gears a little bit, we've seen with the rekindling of Black Lives Matter this summer that now a lot of businesses are super interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion training. So what are some tangible ways that you guys encourage companies to implement those?
Well, the first thing I would say is when you look around the leaders of your company, the ones in the high level positions, that table should look very diverse. If you're at a table and it's all white men sitting around, and there's no one that are Black or indigenous or what is considered now people of color, I don't like that term too much, but then that's problematic. One of the things at Success Centers, we are, I think, 95% diverse. So, you know, that's what your equity footprint should look like. What do you think? Man,
this is so deep, just because it's been a soapbox for so long for me. And, you know, pre-COVID, all the different overt problems that we wanted people to hear about, you know, and be seen. So I was just finally happy that it's bubbled to the surface so much. Like, to me, part of the issues were that all of the corruption and all of the racism and all of the things that I've experienced coast to coast seem fine with everybody. You know, it seems normal. This is normal. It's okay. It's perfectly fine. And I moved from the South where, you know, I'm used to a place built from slavery to California where, okay, this is completely different, but it's very, very racist. Very racist. Yeah. This is, you know, sundown town land over here. It's just different, but it's still racist. Everything is still very, very overt. So, I mean, this summer or this, you know, spring when everything happened, I was excited. I was happy. You know, I'm just like, how can I support? You know what I mean? Like, what do I need to do? And I was just happy that it's actually bubbling to a point where people don't think that this corruption is okay. They don't think this racism is okay. It's not all right for, you know, us to continually be put down and just, you know, given no opportunity for economic development in this country. It's quite disgusting, right? So, I mean, and Miss Ange always breaks down the numbers to me about just like the household, the dollar, and how short a dollar stays in the Black community, how, you know, our wealth year over year is decreasing. I'm like, how does it decrease when we never had any? Like, what is going on? You know,
right.
Like
we don't even understand what wealth is. I mean, we've never had it. Literally. And so when I hear people talk, when they do talk about things like reparations, and I hear like, you know, sometimes we're our own worst enemies in some cases, like the older crowd. And I'm old too, but I'm not that old where I can say, what are we gonna do with reparations? We're gonna go out and spend the you know, if you can go out and blow your what's owed to you on a card, that was never any money. If you've gotten some money and you spent it, that's because you didn't have any wealth in the first place to begin with. So, we have to work on, just not having the right attitude going forward. What we're all striving to create generational wealth in this industry. Let's make it happen. When I saw the folks marching out on the street, my kids call me, Mom, are you protesting? I said, I'm too old because I can't run like I used to. But during Rodney King era, I was out there, but this stuff keeps happening. And sometimes I kind of feel like, if you keep doing the same things over and over and over again without any result, it's kind of like insanity. So we have to come with new, innovative ways to break these barriers. The country's waking up. Some of this old mental thinking is dying off, and we have a new generation of white folks, and I'm so happy and welcoming them. And then just with the influx of folks coming from other countries, they have a different view of what success is and how we're going to gain it. So I think all of us working together and marching out there in the streets and keeping that force moving forward, that's what's important.
And it can't stop though. That's the key.
It cannot stop.
Because we saw what happened, and me and Miss Ange have been talking about these things for, ever since the dawn of this modern day cannabis and everything that was happening. And we're like, no one's talking about this. Why is social equity basically we'll write it in the paper, but we're never going to walk the walk. And then we're just going to skirt it to something else. And now, we have a new president, barely, which still shows you exactly how people feel in this country. We just had an insurrection in the Capitol, which police died. Barely anybody else died, but police died. And it's perfectly clearly blue lives don't matter. It's just that Black lives don't matter. That's the key. There's so much racism still going on every day in this country. I read an article the other day about a man's house that he had brought in a woman, him and his wife brought in one of their white friends to get their house reappraised, and it went up $500,000. And this was in Marin. This was a month ago. That's what we still have to do. We still have to get white people to appraise our properties, to go in and get properties for us. To underappraise our properties, and you get a white face in the very same house, and $500,000 more. I saw that. It was, it's obvious how bad the racism is.
But if someone is saying, I'm still hearing some politicians saying that there's no systematic racism, I'm like, what rock are you under, and how did you get in that office? There definitely is. It's a real thing. And wow.
It's definitely, I just think can't stop, right? Because nothing's happened. We haven't done anything. We've made no progress. A big company putting up a Black Lives Matter sign or wearing a t-shirt when their board is all white and they donate. Okay, cool. You wrote a check to Black Lives Matter and that's supposed to be enough to get us to leave you alone. Should be nowhere near that, right? Yeah. We just have to readdress the problem and why we are in the places we are and why the dollar that we have is so valueless and how we can create more equity and generational wealth, which is something that we talk about all the time, right? Within cannabis and all the other movements, right? But it's a very, 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 we're just at the beginning.
Really this is new. It's not a race, it's a marathon. It's just going to go. And I think we're going to break through some of those barriers. I think that things will, if we stay on the right track and have a one united message, we can't start doing infighting. We have to, develop strategies. And those strategies, if you can help with those strategies, come forward, help us,
It's definitely a system, right? We are an evolution of something that was created long before us, and we need to figure out ways to insert ourselves in that to recreate it. Yes. We need to be electing people that look like ourselves, that want exactly what we want. And we all know America's so corrupt at this point. Even the elected officials don't vote the way we tell them to vote.
Once they get in there, but not necessarily having. I just saw something was Black faces in high places. You just don't want someone to be there just because of that face. They have to have the right policy, And we need a lot of policy that's working for us, because there's been a lot of policy written against us and to keep us where we are, apart. And then when I look at how they have dismantled the civil rights policies, you can no longer do things that are race specific. And I'm like, wait a minute. Black people are the reason why these policies were written in the first place. And now you're telling us we can't say Black people. We have to say, you know, anything else but. So I do listen to, there's something called the ADOS movement, and they have a lot of, they have a Black agenda, and they have a lot of data for our, that shows you where we are in this country. And it's very interesting to watch. And they're basing this stuff on, a lot of the stuff that they're doing on lineage, you know, tracking it back to being descendants of slavery. And, you know, we all know that wealth passes down, not up, and how, you know, we are wealth despaired using the data. These data platforms come from the government. Right. And yet now you're telling you can't direct something directly to the Black community or the Latino community, who have truly, you know, suffered in this country.
History repeats, right? And it's just like when we got the 40 acres and the mule, and they said, this is racism against white people, take it back.
Yeah, but the reparations were given at that point back to the slave owners. So, you know, these things have happened in this country. You know, we know that the Jewish community got reparations, the Japanese community, and then there was also when President Obama was in, who wasn't pro reparations, he did something. I think it was for Guam? He got reparations for those folks. So everyone is getting things that they should be getting, except for us. What do you think about that?
Basically what all of you said, and it's just more disappointing to think about how we tried to create that wealth for ourselves, and it was purposely set on fire.
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness, you're talking about Black Wall Street. I mean, we've done remarkable things. Just think about all the inventions that we've never gotten paid for, that the wealth is sitting around that someone else stole, those things. So, I mean, there's a lot to this. You know, there's a lot to this.
Absolutely. So kind of going on the election, but more on the cannabis side. This was my first election, so I didn't even really notice how many states were for or against cannabis before I checked out my ballot and saw the statistics afterwards. But basically, the election secured new legalization for medical and adult use cannabis in 5 states, and New Jersey's one of them working on it. So what do you think the federal decriminalization or legalization would do for Black and Brown communities, as well as their representation in the cannabis industry?
It's going to shift what they're going to arrest Black and Brown people for. That's one thing. No, I think that, I don't know, that's a load. You go first.
No, I want you to go. The decriminalization.
I mean, honestly, I feel super torn on decriminalization. First off, it's like, we have to deschedule cannabis. We cannot reschedule cannabis. Legalization, and legislation and science have never matched up. The science says this cures cancer, not cures cancer, but this helps anti-inflammatory. But why is that not okay? Because Black people use it. That's why it's not okay. And it still looked like that, even in California. Yeah, even in California. But it cannot be rescheduled. It has to be descheduled. But at the end of the day, it's like, we need to stop arresting Black and Brown people for smoking weed. Like, we know that. That's point blank period. That's modern day, just like how we shifted slavery was in legal racist policies against drugs, right? So I definitely feel like we need to stop arresting people, but before the federal government gets involved, and when the federal government gets involved, we must make sure they institute equity programs that actually give people opportunities to be involved in cannabis that were selling cannabis before, that had gone to jail before, that have been affected by the war on drugs.
Grandfather them in, like some of these companies were grandfathered in.
Exactly.
That
Like,
when from the medicinal side, when it became adult, you say grandfathered in a whole lot of things, a lot of companies. And to me, it kind of should have been, let's if this is going to be something new, wipe the slate clean, and everyone has to reapply. No one should be grandfathered in. I mean, that was hard for me, because I know that, they're helping to make policy because they're already there. They already have relationships with government, and no one wants to give up everything, and people have to come with a better heart, I think.
I mean, the federal government has no heart. Like, federal government, we're talking about the federal government. We're going to have a federal tax. Are they going to look out for Black and brown people in these cities and states that are about to open up?
They have not.
No, they are not. They actually tried to end equity programs in the last Moore bill. They added an amendment in the bill that says that if you've been convicted of a crime of, generally speaking, with marijuana, that you can't you cannot do it. So there's nothing that I have no faith in the federal government putting together a comprehensive bill that's going to help Black and brown people participate in cannabis. Will they stop arresting us? Yes, but then what does that look like? We're still funding police with cannabis dollars. We're funding police with every dollar that comes in all across the board. So what exactly are we doing with these impoverished communities? If the cannabis money that the federal government brings in, if it's going to go to these communities, are we going to make our schools better? Are we going to give a fair playing field and not use property taxes to fund schools so Black and brown kids never get a fair education? If we're going to take the federal money and put it to that, then okay, I see some sort of change that I can get behind. But giving it to the general fund, giving federal government more cannabis dollars to then just stick in pockets of politicians, I cannot see that going well at all. Moreover, I just have no faith in the federal government putting together a comprehensive bill, but I feel like if more people are involved in a comprehensive bill, that definitely would be helpful. But we just see what happens at the final hour, right? They promise us the world, they do all this stuff, and then they stick an amendment that says, never mind, we're going to end equity programs. So what I look at it too is just like, who does it help? Like, does federal legalization help Black and brown people, or does it help the 1%? Does it help Mr. Wrigley? It helps Mr. Wrigley a lot, because now he can go get he can go to the bank and get more funding and get better loans. I can't. Yeah, in theory, I can. Sure, the federal government, like most Black and brown people are not gonna be able to walk into a bank now and get a cannabis loan. No, sorry. The same racism that you faced when you walked in here to get a loan on anything, on any business, on any property that you've ever had, you're gonna have the same struggle. So fixing that, like, that's still the problem, right? Like the systematic racism and how it's allowable so easily with no accountability and no one stopping it because everybody back there is all racist too.
Well, a lot of that stuff was legislated, I mean, it came from federal government legislation, the redlining, that was signed. I mean, those kind of activities,
The war on drugs.
That was put forth by the government, federal government. So
you have to remember, the prisons are private and they have contracts to keep them full.
Yes.
And I can guarantee you a part of their agenda is making sure that people in there look like us, because that's what America was built on.
So to jump right off of that point, because you brought up the war on drugs, that was literally my next question. Like you said, it's been a huge, it's just been plummeting the Black community ever since Reagan. And it's been just the result of this modern day slavery, mass incarceration. It's been the cause of all these separation of families. And it's really just been an overall punishment operation geared by racism versus rehabilitation.
Exactly. So school to prison, all those kind of things. Yeah.
So how have you guys seen the effects of the war on drugs in your immediate industry and community?
Well, I was just telling Marie when I got here, sometimes I walk out of my door at work, and just the devastation that I see that has happened to folks that have pretty much given up, or, it looks like what most people would consider a third world country sometimes. and these are people who have lineage in this country, that whose ancestors helped build this country as chattel slaves. And it's just devastating that, folks that should be, walking around with prestige or walking around with their heads down. And a lot of homeless, 60% of the homeless rate is people that are African, from the African-American community. I mean, these are things that, it's shameful. It really is shameful. And I hope people keep marching. They don't forget why they were out in those streets. If you drive around Oakland, I mean, there's tent towns throughout with people that are living on the street in squalor. It's just really, really bad. So what are we going to do about this in some of the, one of the richest countries in the world? There's a lot of work to be done.
I think it's sad, we are very racist, but we hate poor people first. Like poor people in this country that are in, it's like San Francisco, like she was saying, that we just see a lot of poverty, right, in the richest country in the world, and it's all there on purpose. And you really have to figure, if they wanted to stop this, they can, we can, but what do we have to do to stop it? First, with the war on drugs, it's like the war on drugs is still going on.
It definitely is.
It never stopped. It's still happening right now. Like, I called one of my old landlords to ask for his support on an application that I was putting in. And I've never really told him how involved in cannabis I was. And he was like, Marie, I love you, but I do not support cannabis. Like, okay, well, why not? I mean, you get prescribed drugs from your pharmacist, right? You see that there's an opioid crisis in the world, right? You also understand that cannabis has more peer-reviewed, scientifically backed studies than Adderall, but I'm sure you're okay with Adderall, right? So to say all that, there is a war on drugs. There is such a war still on drugs in this country. And even if you're in a place that's like 15 minutes outside San Francisco, this is the conversation that you can still have. And then the conversations that I have on the other side with like realtors and other business owners that just don't even comprehend why we would even have an equity program. What is an equity program? Why would we give people that go to jail a business? Like, they're not going to run this business. Like, maybe because they've been running this business their entire lives. That's why they went to jail. Or maybe we should at least give these people the opportunity to participate. I mean, who are you to decide? That's insanity. But I mean, there's just people out there are so ignorant. They're just ignorant to the medical benefits because of all the, systematic, just the stigmas rather that have been passed from the laws. Like, laws create the stigma. Law creates the rule. Whether the law is right or wrong, that's the law. We're supposed to follow the law. Well, that's the sad thing as with all of these things. We see the law is wrong. We see a lot of these things are wrong, but what can we do about them specifically? But yeah, I think that the war on drugs is definitely still going on. It's like cannabis for sure, back again, is just a rapid expression of what goes on everywhere. And like we see it, and it's really sad. And like, we're very, very, aware of like all of these things happening, but it's happening in every industry, it's happening everywhere. Like, we don't own a lot of industries, a piece of any industry.
You owe me a soda.
Right. So we spend a lot of time there. But yeah, I definitely think that like, the war on drugs is still going on. It comes from the top down. I think, what do you do when you have city councils pushing cannabis? City council literally says, yes, we are going to legalize. Imagine this in New Jersey. Cities all over New Jersey, they said, the people are like, we want recreational cannabis, we want medical cannabis, but the police said no. There's literal sheriffs all over the United States of America that are literally like, oh, we do not support this, and we are going to continue to arrest people. What? Like, how does that still exist? And like, how are you allowed to clearly defy your job and your role as a civil servant?
Right?
How that's just so blatant. As the police, as the person who's supposed to be protecting me from what's passed down to you from the law. This is the law, but you're making up your own law because you're the police. So we just definitely have to like analyze,
A lot of the way that the laws are written, I don't think they understand what it's like for people, with boots on the ground. One of the things that was kind of really, I was like, huh? There was a guy that came through our program at Success Centers, and he had to move because of gentrification. It's too expensive to live here. So he moved to another state. And in order to get a cannabis job, you had to go to the police department and have a background check there. And he had an old ticket from when he was there before, maybe 15 years ago, for traffic violation. He's going to go get a job and he gets arrested for an old ticket that he had. I'm like, what the hell? I'm sorry, what the heck is going on? That the police are deciding who are the winners and losers and who's going to get the work in cannabis. I mean, the way that we are kind of legislating some of this stuff, it's still the same systematic disaster was policy that's hurt us in the first place. So we got to get beyond that.
And it's sad too for cannabis because a lot of our money goes to the police.
A lot.
To then not support us. And that's for anything, whether you're looking at all the corruption that took place from cannabis companies paying off local, mayors, supervisors, anyone throughout the process that could help them, all the way through to nonprofits that they donate to. Who do you think they donate to? The police is who they donate to, right? So, I mean, it's a repetitive cycle where you're just like, man, how do you even want to be involved in this system, Or how do you change the system? Because you can't just let weed go to the 1% this fast, but it's happening.
Yes.
And it's happening rapidly. Florida is a perfect example because they went extremely corporate, like big business.
Yeah, that's all that got businesses in Florida.
Big business.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Sad.
I mean, you really got to look at like who's going to own this industry. And we as Black people don't have an industry. We should at least take this one.
Absolutely. So it's 5:02. I'm not sure how much time you guys have left. I have 3 more questions. So
okay, we'll make them quick.
Okay. So this is surrounding COVID-19. We know it's really hurt Black businesses all over the country. They've been closing at twice the rate of their white counterparts. And at the peak of the pandemic, they were declining at 41% in comparison to white businesses at only 17%. So how has COVID-19 affected your businesses? And do you see this as, do you see the effects being long-term in terms of the cannabis industry and market?
Well, what I will say for at Success Centers, we immediately jumped onto the virtual realm with our workshops, and we remained open to service our clients, not just in the Equity for Industry program, but all of our programming. So we were able to keep going. I know that a lot of the businesses were hurt because until they were deemed an essential business, because there were big layoffs, and then all of a sudden they deemed it an essential business, and which was a wonderful thing because people need their medicine. They were able to open up and rehire some of the folks that were laid off. It's been very difficult, and then watching all the death in the community from folks dying from this. If you have wealth disparity, what do you think is going to happen if a pandemic comes? Those people who are wealth disparate are going to be the first ones that are going to be grossly affected by a pandemic. So, I mean, it's like, this stuff exists. Now you see people have died from it, and what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, COVID-19, man. It's very, very interesting 2020 we've had. I think cannabis overall, COVID-19 was positive for people that had delivery or retailers that were not in financial areas or areas highly dependent on, those 9-to-5 customers being there for coming in and out of their businesses. Overall, this definitely was an increase last year. I think things probably have plateaued by now. There's a lot of new rules, of course, with COVID. So added trainings, added costs associated with the business. But I feel like for cannabis, there definitely were some overall positives. Prices went up considerably. Businesses rampantly put in delivery, which delivery before was really an afterthought for a lot of people, even
they
though
didn't want delivery.
that's what we know. We like e-commerce and we like to order online, so delivery is the thing of the future. So there was a lot of changes. I think for me, like my first company was delivery in cannabis, so we were operational through the pandemic and just had to institute a lot of new standard operating procedures to make sure things were clean and safe, and dealing with just like the hyper concern of your employees, you know, because they don't have a job that they can zoom in from. So that's something that just definitely became a big focus. But yeah, I think overall definitely increased the industry as a whole just for profitability for the year. But cannabis is so volatile. Like every year in California, we deal with fires. We might have millions and millions and millions of pounds burned. We dealt with fires, COVID, and everything else in 2020. Yeah. So, I mean, our prices this year are going to be highly affected by all of these things going on. And just like the cost of production is always pretty volatile. But yeah, I think overall it was a unexpected boost for most cannabis businesses.
Thank goodness.
It was much needed.
Somebody was winning.
Right.
And where do you guys see the future of the cannabis industry, and especially with Black and brown representation?
I think it's good. Like more and more people are being more and more involved every day. Seems like, you know, we're having a lot more. Having more people that are definitely hitting up Miss Ange, wanting to be involved in equity, wanting to be involved in social justice movements, wanting to be involved in how can they change their footprint for their business, hopefully, and get more Black and brown bodies in there to represent, you know, cannabis. But future-wise, it's very interesting, right? Like if the federal government legalizes, that creates third-tier distribution now, where we'll be exporting outside of California, which will then create basically what we've done, like a replication of what they've done in France for champagne and like different types of products coming from certain localities, which will be very helpful for the California market. But I'm not sure, you know, I'm hopeful that the industry can be more compassionate and sustainable. Right now, the only thing that I know is that more people buy gray market cannabis than ever before. And even where you are, Kalyn, when regulation comes, when they tax an eighth the way that it's taxed, and you can get half the price from the guy that you've always bought weed from in New Jersey, it's a no-brainer, right? Like they need to make conscious legislation with the taxes to actually bring down the use of the gray market and bring more people into the legal market, which is something that's definitely not happening in California. We do not want people to shop in the legal market in California. It's very obvious with the taxation and the regulation that's created by going into a dispensary. Every little thing you see on your receipt, it's insane. And then imagine a federal tax coming. I mean, some cities have a local tax of 30%, in addition to state sales tax, in addition to the 27% excise tax. Like you're buying weed, but you're only buying taxes. The only thing you got on your receipt is taxes.
It's amazing to look at that receipt.
It's crazy.
What is all this?
So many taxes. Yeah. So if federal taxes are coming, I just would pray that we take a very, very good look at how much tax the average consumer is willing to pay. Okay. And if we don't want people to exist in the legal market, then okay, then we just don't want people to exist in the legal market. But something has to be done for the regulatory framework, the tax framework, for the future of cannabis, legal cannabis.
Yeah.
I agree. And lastly, how can we work collectively to advocate for both industrial and social equity and more widespread legalization?
I would say, like, back to getting involved. I think one of my pet peeves is when people say, hey, Marie, why don't you go to Sacramento and do this? Or why don't you write a letter? Why don't you?
Yeah,
Like,
everybody,
everyone needs to be involved in this
everybody needs to
situation.
be involved.
Like, we
yeah.
all need to be way more involved. We need to make sure that all the local officials understand that we care about equity. There's cities all over California that are passing for the first time commercial cannabis regulations, and there's nothing in there having to do with equity at all, right? But there's people going to jail for weed in their community every day. So what do we do to make sure that every community in every city that wants to make money on cannabis does it in the right way?
I would say too, for the equity community nationwide, there's organizations out there like NORML and the National Cannabis Industry Association. Here in California, we just met with the CCIA, who are going to be putting together a portal for membership. I mean, some of these memberships are very expensive to have, but these are lobbying groups that, get to help form some of the policy. I would like to see a lot of these major groups like NORML and like the National Cannabis Industry Association, in order to get the equity voice and to understand what equity is doing, offer some of these free memberships, which they have, but make sure that they're in some of these committees that are making decisions so that we don't get left by the wayside.
Yeah, I would add to that too, that these lobbying groups are great, but just make sure they're lobbying for what you want.
Yes.
Course, right? Like, there's so many different things. The taxes, of course. Taxes aren't what hurting Black and brown people in cannabis. Taxes are what hurting corporate cannabis, right? Like, Black and brown people don't even have the chance to even know what's going to hurt us because we can barely get involved. So
Exactly.
just making sure that, like, you're lobbying for activism within the community, for the community. And just another point I always say, like, if so many Americans scared to put their money in cannabis, like because it's not federally legal, but the Russians came, the Chinese came, all the foreign interests came, all the Canadians came, and then they took us public. So we're literally going to let everybody get rich, and we're not even going to make money on our own
that's
commodity.
crazy.
Like, that's insanity to me, right? And then you expect these people to care about us? You think the Russian dollar that comes into New Jersey is going to do anything for local New Jerseyans that they don't have to? No, they're not. But that money should have went to someone local, right? To make sure that there's a reason for American investment, and people that can bring in American investment aren't scared to, is key. But just making sure that it's done for the right reason and that we have access to it.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be that difficult. It shouldn't be that difficult for me to go raise $1 million. It sounds crazy, but it's not that difficult for the average white guy that wants to get involved in cannabis. It's not.
Get involved, y'all.
And I guess, what are like some examples how someone like me, the average college student, could also get involved?
Oh my goodness, there's so many different ways. If you have a heart for this business, if you have a talent that you graduated with that you want to develop and really work with people who really need your help, giving back to the community, seek out organizations like Success Centers. And I'm sure there's some in your own area where you are in New Jersey. You know that this cannabis thing is going to be coming there eventually. Get prepared, listen to the messages that, Marie just delivered. Get prepared for that. These are an opportunity for you to get your strategy together, be a strategizer, get heavily into this. The youth, I'm praying for the youth to come forward. You guys are new thinkers. You're different than my generation. I love you. And make it work. Get in there and get involved. Really.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I'm from Nashville. Like, I would pray, hope, everything in me, right, that Nashville, Tennessee would have an equity program. But the reality of it is they're definitely not going to have one unless we make them. Mm-hmm. Oh my God. You think
it should be mandatory?
They're not going to have one unless we make them. So how is it going to be mandatory though, Ms. Ange? People have to do something about it. I'm not going to do it. She's not going to do it.
Yeah, my folks are in Knoxville. I'm telling you, you guys get ready, start strategizing, figure this stuff out. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee. So, it's going to move that way. And I don't want folks to get left out. And that's why another thing I will say is that our workshops are open to everyone. This whole nation is our hood, you know, so come, you're welcome to sign up to come to these workshops to get yourself knowledge. What's happening in California will be in your state. So come and learn about the industry. These workshops are free while they last. And you know, just come in and join and learn. And if you have something to offer this community, I'm here to help let you exhibit that. How about that?
And imagine if like you could organize a lot of the college campuses to send in letters and organize people to create equity programs now.
Yes.
Because it really like, it has to happen now. Okay. Because that's the thing. They get it first and then they run with it. And then we're sitting here like, oh, there's an equity program.
Yeah, equity cannot be the afterthought.
3 or 4 years later,
yeah.
Then we have money coming in. Then we have businesses opening. It can't be like that everywhere, right? It can't be like that in Atlanta. It shouldn't be like that in New Jersey. There has to be an equity force first that's actually noted and powerful enough for the local legislators to think about equity while they're thinking about that first bill. Because it has to go 1 and 1.
It has to. Don't let equity be an afterthought when it comes to where you are. Start now, organizing. That's what you young college students can do. Go get them.
Thank you. And thank you guys so much. I know we ran over time, but thank you guys still for staying and answering these questions and just for joining Honeysuckle for this discussion and just all of the amazing perspectives and just knowledge that you guys have provided. So thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so thankful, Kalyn. Thank you.
It's interesting to do a video for a magazine.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I was told to, okay, so it was going to start as just like this, and then I was going to transcribe it and make it into some type of article. And then I think I was in touch with Zoe and she was like, oh, are you guys going to do like a live event? And I was like, live event? And then I kind of just said, no, I don't think we're going to do a live event. And then she was like, okay. So then my editor was like, well, how about we just like take a recording of it and we can post it on our Instagram page as like an Instagram like video and people can just go back and watch it. So yeah.
Thank you for having us. Anyone that wants to get involved or wants to reach out to me, you can reach me through email at awhite@successcenters.org or on my Instagram at 415 Queen Cannabis. And you?
Reach out to Miss Ann.
Yeah, reach out to me. How about that?
Definitely reach out to Miss Ann and we will get everything started. My IG is for the farm, md.farms.ca.
I think that is.
Yeah, md.farms, plural.ca. And then there's mdnumbers.inc.
Awesome. So anyone who watches this, definitely reach out to these two. And thank you guys again. I won't hold you much longer and I'll let you know when all of this gets posted.
Keep loving your heart. Peace.
Thank you. Will do. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.